In 1996, the original Space Jam movie was released, and it earned over 3 times its budget of $80 million. 25 years later, Space Jam: A New Legacy was released with a budget of $150 million, and it barely broke even. So what's wrong? They had the money to spend, they had the world-renowned NBA star, they had the hype of the 25th century, and they had the VFX expertise of Industrial Light and Magic and Cinesite. As far as VFX goes, both films are incredible. The 1996 original Space Jam could not have been filmed 5 years earlier because Michael Jordan's movements would have had to have been precisely choreographed and filmed with a locked-down motion control camera. Instead, they developed a technique that allowed them to do a free-moving camera style, and this technique used a pioneering motion tracking process. They had red dots positioned on their green screen backgrounds, forming 4-foot squares. The live-action plates picked up Jordan's movements with the basketball, but also picked up the movements of these dots in the background. The position of these dots was mapped, and the CG background could then be anchored to these red dots, each corresponding to a certain point in the CG environment. This meant that as the camera moved around Jordan, so did the red dots, and thusly so did the CG environment. The red dots were then removed using another piece of Cinesite's proprietary software, humorously named Ballbuster. This technique also gave them a measurement for the speed the background would be moving at, and therefore an idea of the amount of motion blur that would be occurring with each movement, and that would need to be added to any element in the background. As movies go, Space Jam had it all: models and miniatures, special effects, traditional and digital animation, digital coloring and compositing, and over 1,000 VFX shots. This was at a time when having a few hundred was a lot. Independence Day, for example, had just half that amount. To really put into context just how ambitious Space Jam was, all of these shots were created at a time when Cinesite's render farm, otherwise known as Holly, and cost them around $1 million, consisted of just 256 megabytes of RAM and 16 CPUs, with only 4 gigabytes of memory between them. That's less computing power than most of us have on our cell phones. In A New Legacy, they also pushed the limits of what is possible to achieve with visual effects. Rather than just bringing LeBron into the Looney Tune world in a similar way to Jordan in the first film, they created a whole Warner Bros. Universe where LeBron was transformed into a 2D cartoon character, the Looney Tunes were transformed into 3D cartoon characters, and professional basketball players were transformed into 3D CG creatures. The Warner Bros. Animation Group, or WAG, dealt with the 2D animation using new techniques to color and add tonal dimension to the 2D characters. But in order to bring these 2D characters into the realm of 3 dimensions, Industrial Light and Magic would need a massive team spread over 3 different time zones. ILM first had to research how the Looney Tunes characters had evolved since their creation back in the 1930s right up to the present day, and then use that progression to help them take their evolution one step further. For the members of the Goon Squad, real professional basketball players were used, but their performance wasn't captured like Michael Jordan's was in the original Space Jam. Instead of a basketball court with a green screen and Red Bull's background and people in green suits, they had a court with green screens that was actually a massive motion capture area with over 100 cameras. Each performer then wore a mocap suit and head-mounted facial mocap cameras. This allowed them not only to capture each individual facial performance, but also to capture the subtle nuances of movement that are unique to each player. To put into context just how ambitious A New Legacy was, once the designs for each of these 3D characters was agreed upon, they all then had to be sculpted, rigged, animated, colored, textured, groomed, and lit. For example, the shot where hundreds of Warner Bros. Characters rush in to watch the game took almost a year to complete. Despite all this work, A New Legacy received pretty bad reviews in general. Many felt that instead of a movie, they were watching a shameless 115-minute long advert for Warner Bros. Content with more cameos and stale catchphrases than storyline. However, the 1996 Space Jam received similar reviews, claiming it was an attempt to cash in on the popularity of Michael Jordan, the Warner Bros. Cartoon characters, and a Nike commercial, and yet it did well at the box office. The original Space Jam knew the audience it was targeting were children, and so it was made to capture the children's excitement and enthusiasm. Space Jam 2 wanted everyone to be its audience, and so it tried to cover all the bases, but ended up spreading itself so thin that it failed to both excite and enthuse. Back in 1996, everyone knew and loved both the Looney Tunes and Michael Jordan. In 2021, things have changed. While many people still love sports stars like LeBron James, not many people still know about the Looney Tunes or even understand or like them. And so after 90 years of zany characters, wacky gags, and classic catchphrases, it may be time for the Looney Tunes to truly say, "That's all, folks." Please give us a like if you enjoyed this video. Don't forget the links to the music used in this video are in the video description, and let us know in the comments if you actually enjoyed this movie or not.